Hey everyone, Thomas here with ForReel Movie News and Reviews, and I am joined by my friend and fellow film critic and blogger, Matthew Simpson from Awesome Friday. Matt, I'm really excited to have you here for this.
Yeah, it was really cool to have some cross-border connection to talk about some movies.
Yeah, for sure. This is actually a really cool occasion because it was a year ago at this that we met.
That's
So,
true. Yeah, last year. Yeah, that's cool.
so no, this is a cool, I guess, reunion of sorts. But happy to be covering stuff with you and talking about movies we're looking forward to. So yeah, we figured we would hop on to Zoom and discuss the five films that we're each looking forward to most at the Vancouver International Film Festival this year, which of course starts on, what is it, the 24th, Matt?
Yeah, Thursday the 24th, Friday the
Yes,
24th, the 24th. It's the
the
24th.
24th. Yeah, so the VIFF starts on September 24th and goes to October 7th, I believe, and they have a wide range of films, covering BC, locally filmed movies, Canadian films, and of course renowned films from across the world and from other film festivals. So yeah, there's a lot of really great things being displayed, and yeah, so we're excited to talk about the five that each of us are most looking forward to. I think, yeah. So I go ahead. I'm gonna let you get started, Matt, because I'm very the list that you put together. I think is a really cool list, and I'm excited to hear you talk about what you picked.
Yeah, I've tried to. One thing I try to do with VIFF every year is try to see movies that I wouldn't otherwise really get to see, and unfortunately, because of Canada and budgets and all that, there's a lot of Canadian features I don't usually get to see. They don't get the press that a lot of other ones do. So the first one I'd like to talk about is a documentary called Inconvenient Indian, which is going to be streaming for the whole festival. And it's an adaptation of a book by an author called Thomas King, and it's an examination of basically the Indigenous history of Canada and Indigenous peoples within Canada. And part of the reason I think it's going to be an important one is that, obviously, Thomas, you're aware that, the United States is in the news for, all kinds of protests and police brutality and all that at the moment,
Yeah,
right?
very true.
And there's a perception, I feel, in the world that if you, just drive a few hours north, that kind of thing sort of stops. Like that you cross the border into Canada and suddenly everything's fine. But actually, historically, that's very much so not true. We have a long and storied history of mistreating Indigenous peoples of this land, basically. And Inconvenient Indian is the book, anyway, and I'm sure the movie does too, takes a fairly deep and emotional dive into that history. And I'm very curious to see how that plays out.
Yeah, for sure. I watched the trailer for this after I saw your list, and it seems very it seems like it's going to be very in depth about exactly what you're talking about, and the content I think is going to be very important for people who want to acknowledge and honor that history, and also make sure that it's recognized. And I think movies like that and documentaries like that are so important for culture, and so important for progress when it comes to making sure that underrepresented people are that their history is acknowledged and honored, and that we continue to do that. And so these movies are very important for that. And it looks like a really great movie as well. I think that it looks well done.
Yeah, and my sincere hope is that because obviously we have a long history of this thing, but racism,
Mm-hmm.
but that is still happening today. And I sincerely hope that part of what the movie does is draw a straight line from where we were to where we are, and highlight that maybe we have come a long way, but probably have a long way to go as well.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, absolutely. Good choice there. I'm looking forward to that as well. And I know you put it on your list, so I figured that was going to be a good one to talk about. But for me, documentaries seem to be the big draw for me at the festival this year. They have a lineup of really, really interesting looking documentaries. I think the one that I am looking most forward to is a Peruvian film called Into the Storm. And yeah, like I said, I mean, among all documentaries that I want to see, there's that one. Obviously, an inconvenient Indian. The Merkel documentary looks interesting. Super Frenchy looks good. Race to Alaska. Time, which actually is also a New York Film Festival selection. Like just a whole lot of movies that documentaries that are featured. But Into the Storm was one that really caught my attention because one thing that I'm drawn to in film is the cinematography. And Into the Storm really looked like a movie that was very well captured. And on top of that, it's an incredible story. The premise of it is this young Peruvian boy who lives in an impoverished town, but he has this interest in surfing, and becoming a world surfing champion. But he has to overcome, obviously, the challenges of being in a more impoverished area of the country and being poor and needing resources, but and also just getting over the challenges of adolescence, the challenges that come with growing and trying to figure out who you are and where you belong, and is this even what you really want to be doing, and in order to become the world champion. So the documentary is filmed over 5 years, and it's such a captivating story when you do have this documentary about a young child or a young boy who has these big dreams and wants to go chase them, and it's captured over 5 years. And like I said, it looks like it's a beautifully captured film. The story is inspiring. I'm excited for this one to be featured at the festival.
Yeah, this is the one too where I think the sort of origin of the story is that he found like a broken surfboard and teaches himself to surf, right? Like it's pretty inspiring. Like you find this thing, you do the thing, and suddenly you're like, yeah, he literally found his calling like broken on the beach. I think that's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and what a against the odds kind of story, because like you said, that's a kind of a critical a detail in his story is it's not like he was handed a surfboard, or he had the means to go surfing. He had to actually like um, make it happen himself, and it started with this broken board. So yeah, it's a very interesting story, and yeah, again, I'm excited for it to be featured at the festival.
Yeah, I mean, it's continuing on the documentary train. My next one is actually also a documentary. It's a story out of Alberta, about a Black cowboy named John Ware. The film is called John Ware Reclaimed. John Ware is sort of a local hero legend. There's there's hills and buildings and streets and hiking trails all named after him in Alberta. He was a slave in the South in the late 1800s who I'm honestly not 100% clear on whether he was emancipated or whether he fled, but he came to Alberta and became a very successful rancher, and just this super like integral person within Southern Alberta history. Now, the interesting thing about this one to me is that most of what we know, and to be fair, like I know the name, but I'm not 100% familiar with the story. But most of what we know comes from a book that was written in the 60s by a white historian. And this documentary, John Ware Reclaimed, is being produced by, Afro-Canadian filmmakers to try and reclaim the story and give it a little more context. And I think that's just super interesting. It's also just super interesting to me that like, it's just the type of thing you don't hear about. Like even the trailer for the film says that, John Ware is one of those famous people you've never heard about because he's the only, Black rancher in the 1860s in Alberta. But I mean, most people I know have never heard of him. So it's also just a super interesting, again, cultural and very Canadian artifact. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I watched the trailer as well, and it is interesting to have a documentary or a film that wants to set the record straight on things like that, because that's a very important story in history. I mean, I don't personally know the story myself, but it seems like just from the trailer and the content that I'm reading about it, like there's a lot of like myths and misconceptions about his story, and there shouldn't be, because he is such a important component to the history of that region. So yeah, this is important. It's important to be able to get the facts straight, get the correct story out there, and like the title implies, reclaim the story and the history of John Ware.
Yeah, I'm 100%. And like, it's just one of those, I feel like Canada has a lot of stories that not a lot of Canada really knows, because we're such a large place. And this is one of those important ones to sort of get out there into, the rest of Canada and, the rest of the world too.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm looking forward to seeing that one too. We can hop off the documentary train for a moment. We'll get back to that. But this next one that I've been keeping my eye on and I'm really interested in seeing is called Tales of the Lockdown. It's a Spanish film, and as the title alludes to, it's about stories, I guess quirky stories and kind of oddball stories about the lockdown because of COVID. And it was filmed under lockdown conditions by 5 different directors. Like, the concept of the movie is very interesting, and one of the reasons that it is that it's on my radar and something that I'm really looking forward to is one, I am very interested in how media is going to be portraying and including the whole pandemic situation in stories. But a couple of weeks ago, I watched The Host. Here in the States, it's on Shudder. And it's a horror film. Yeah, for sure. So it's a horror film that's based during the lockdown because of the pandemic. And I think what that movie did with setting that environment of pandemic lockdown, but then telling this horror story and keeping the same horror beats just in this different environment was very interesting. And I enjoyed that movie a lot. So this is I actually don't even know what genre this is. The way the description describes it, I actually have to read it because I don't even know like what to expect as far as tone. Tales of Lockdown.
As far as I understand, it's a bit of the main comparison I've heard is to a film from a few years ago from, I believe, out of Argentina called Wild Tales.
Yeah.
So it's what I understand it to be is an anthology film. So there's no, like, it's going to be 5 different genres basically. Each one will be a different type of story by a different director with different actors. And I don't know if you saw Wild Tales. If you haven't, you should definitely look it up. It is a great film. It's like 2 hours long, or I think, but it's basically 5 short films put together, and each one of them is great for totally different reasons.
See, and I love the idea of an anthology film. Like, I think that when you can bring a whole bunch of really great stories together to like either make a bigger point or tell a bigger story or whatever, like, I think that putting great stories together in that kind of format is something that really intrigues me. And that's something that intrigued me a lot about the description of this movie. Is this idea that we're dealing with 5 different stories from 5 different directors, and then putting together with this common theme of the lockdown. I'm very interested in seeing how that goes, and I'm excited. I mean, nothing about the pandemic excites me, but but it's a major chapter in world history, and media is obviously going to be covering it. Entertainment is going to be including it, and this is kind of the early part of that era of pandemic-oriented or lockdown-oriented storytelling. So we're at the very beginning of that, and I'm very interested in seeing, now that we've seen The Host and what it did, what the Spanish film is going to do with that, and then kind of tracking what the rest of the industry, how the rest of the industry then handles the topic.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we're in the middle of a horrible period in our history, and it's one of those things that will be reflected in media. And I think you're right. This is the beginning of us seeing that. You're already starting to see it on TV with reality competition shows being effectively remote as well. And obviously, every blockbuster film this year, except for Tenet, basically being pushed into next year, if not further. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting media landscape for the next 12 months. And this is probably going to be a really interesting feature of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. My next one is a film that has actually played a couple of festivals already, and I'm really looking forward to it, despite the fact that it's only reviewing sort of okay, but it's called My Salinger Year. It takes place in the 90s. It stars Margaret Qualley of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood and The Leftovers, who I really like. And she's in The Nice Guys as well, I really like. And it's based on a memoir of a woman whose name escapes me at the moment, of her time breaking into the New York literary scene. And she's put in charge of answering fan mail sent to J.D. Salinger, who at that point she didn't even realize was still alive because he's such a recluse. Sigourney Weaver plays her boss. I honestly can't tell you exactly what I'm looking forward to about this film. I just like the people involved and I like the idea. And as a person who grew up in the 90s, I'm kind of excited by the fact that we've come out of this 80s nostalgia period and we're entering this 90s nostalgia period. So yeah, there's no one big thing that's really attracting me to this film. It's just a number of little things. I guess if there was one big thing, it would just be I love Sigourney Weaver. I've never not liked her in anything. So yeah.
Yes, that's exactly what caught my attention about this film as well. In fact, I think when I first was going through the list of movies, I might have even accidentally skipped over this one, but then you put it on your list, and I looked and I'm like, Sigourney Weaver, I'm interested.
Yeah, 100%, right? She's never not good, even if she's in like a movie that's quote like bad. She's always good.
Yeah,
so
yeah, absolutely. I always love her part. I love what just her presence on screen. It's just always great, regardless of the actual what I think about the whole movie. So
yeah, and also like young Miss Qualley is not like super famous just yet, but everything she's done so far that I have seen has also been pretty great. I'm really excited to see where she goes, and at this point, I'm willing to give anything that she's doing a chance. So
yeah, absolutely, for sure. Yep, putting that on my radar now. And we're back on the documentaries. And this is my last documentary to mention. Is a movie called The Magnitude of All Things. This movie seems so interesting because of the I guess the premise. I'm really awful with names. I'm still trying to get names down, but they're hold on, let me pull up the.
Well, you're talking about the director Jennifer Abbott.
Yes, Jennifer Abbott. What she's doing, at least according from what I can read in the description, what she's doing with this movie is kind of drawing this parallel between this loss that she's experienced and the global climate crisis, right? Is that kind of like the idea behind the film?
Yeah. It seems to be drawing a pretty direct line between the personal grief she's experienced at the loss of her sister. Right. Spoilers. It's in the trailer. And also like and also the grief that people around the world are feeling at the world effectively slowly but surely being destroyed by climate change.
Right, which is I have always felt it's a very important topic to be addressing. The climate change issue, we shouldn't ever put that on the back burner. So that's very topical. And I am interested in seeing how that parallel comes together in this movie. But again, one of the things that I'm really drawn to in film and documentaries is the cinematography and how it's captured and how it looks. And just watching the trailer, even the trailer is just like I'm in awe of like the visual appeal and the visual spectacle of the movie. So I am very interested and excited to subject myself to 100 minutes of that. It just seems like a very powerful story, and it seems like a very ultimately, I imagine that hopefully it's a beautiful story in many senses of that word, and in many factors of the film. So
yeah,
that's
I completely agree, though, that the first thing that struck me about it was that every image in the trailer looks incredible. Like, and every image I've seen, still image of the film, also looks incredible. Like, it looks incredibly photographed. I hope that it is as I always worry with documentaries about things like climate change that they sort of end up, for better or for worse, just for worse, never mind. Sort of preaching to the choir a little bit. Like, I'm sort of worried that they're not going to change anyone's mind. So I kind of have this hope that if it draws this very direct emotional connection from like a worldwide loss to a personal one, that it might resonate with some people that it honestly needs to resonate with if we're going to have any, you know, meaningful change.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more.
Yeah. I have my next film is actually a French film. Interesting. One of the themes I've noticed covering VIFF for the past, this is my 5th or 6th year covering it, it turns out I really enjoy French cinema. There's been at least one French film every year that I've absolutely loved. And this year there's one that is playing called In the Name of the Land, which has actually already been out in France since last year. And it's about a man who inherits the family farm and basically has to keep it afloat. That seems to be the entire pitch, and it seems to be a fairly straightforward family drama, generational family drama, the conflict between the man and his father who's given up the farm, and the conflict between the man and his son who maybe doesn't want to inherit the farm. Yeah, it's just one of those films that like I'm very much drawn to family dramas, and it looks gorgeous, and I've enjoyed, again, every year I enjoy at least one French film at the festival as one of my favorites of the festival, and this, I'm wondering if this is going to be the one, basically.
Yeah, hopefully so. I think you're right about French film. I mean, this is my second time covering the Vancouver International Film Festival, and obviously last year, what is Portrait of a Lady on Fire your French film from last year that you loved?
Actually, had 2 last year, but yeah, Portrait of a Lady on Fire was one of them.
I absolutely adored Portrait of a Lady on Fire. So yeah, French film is always winning at the festival. So yeah, I haven't looked a whole lot into this one yet, but I'm excited. I think you mentioned that it's been out in France for a little bit now and is earning positive reception. So yeah, I'm excited to see how that one turns out and add more French films to my catalog of favorite movies at the festival.
Yeah. Apparently, it came out last year, like in mid-late 2019, and apparently it just made, like, every critic loved it, and it made all the money in France, apparently. So I'm pretty excited to see how it does here.
For sure. This is actually a very perfect segue because the next film I want to talk about, and I'm confident you want to talk about, is Jumbo. I was very, very, very sad to not be able to cover this one at Fantasia. So this is my second chance to try to cover it. And there's so much about this movie that really attracts my attention. First of all, being French. That seems to be a winning quality right now. But secondly, it is tied to Portrait of a Lady on Fire. Naomi Merlant, is that how you pronounce her name?
Naomi, yeah, Merlant.
Naomi, okay, cool, yeah. So she is the lead actress in Portrait of a Lady on Fire. I loved her performance, absolutely loved it. And I have no doubt that she is going to just own this role as well. I think this just seems to be like a great streak for her, and I'm really looking forward to seeing that performance here because I love what she did so much in Portrait of a Lady on Fire. But also, I'm a theme park nerd. I could probably fall in love with a ride, so I'm very interested. I'm very interested in that dynamic here. Like, what does that look like from a storytelling perspective?
How does one fall in love with a theme park ride? That is
right, because obviously I love roller coasters. I love rides. I love, in this kind of general sense of like I enjoy it. But the premise here is she actually falls in love with the ride, right?
Yeah, super
man,
super interesting.
Yeah, what a concept.
I can't wait to find out what it's a metaphor for, basically.
Right.
and how they're going to tie that together. Like, I think some of the best films I've seen ever have been like somewhat ridiculous like that. And I think that's one of the powers of genre filmmaking is you can put this outlandish concept out there and then relate it back to people's lives. And I'm really curious to see how this one plays with that.
Yeah, for sure. So excited to watch this movie. So
And
yeah,
also, it
that
just honestly, like speaking of cinematography again, like it just looks really pretty. Like,
it does. Yes, I mean even I mean the natural sense of like theme parks at night with the LED lights and flashing lights and kind of how
mhm.
symmetric everything is and how kind of glowing it just looks like it lends itself to being beautifully captured and and from what I've seen with the trailers it looks like it was beautifully captured. So,
Yeah, 100%.
all winning components and things for me. So I'm excited.
Yeah. Well, the last one I'm going to talk about here today is also a foreign film. It's from, I believe, Norway, but I'm not 100% sure. It's either Norway or Denmark. Anyway, it stars Mads Mikkelsen, who is one of my favorite actors as well. He's another one of those guys who, like, if he's in a thing, I'll watch the thing. Um, and it's about a group of men, all school teachers, who they're out for dinner one night and they're discussing just life, as far as I can tell. And someone mentions there's a philosopher who says that the human body has a natural deficiency of 0.5% alcohol, and they decide to test this theory, and they decide to keep their blood alcohol at 0.05% as an experiment for whatever length of time. And so basically, it's about a bunch of middle-aged men who are probably slightly dissatisfied with their lives, drinking a lot and seeing how that affects their lives. And I mean, I don't drink, but it seems like a pretty apt metaphor for the year. And it seems like another sort of interesting way to explore Mads Mikkelsen's talent for just acting. Like it seems like a fun acting challenge. So
Yeah, yeah. I
I'm
guess
very excited to see it.
I didn't even think about that. Like the acting level that's necessary to regularly portray 0.05 alcohol blood content. Like, what is that going to look like? Like, how does that?
Well, and I think like it's one of those things that sounds really fun. And I kind of honestly like this is I can't remember the director's name off the top of my head. But Mads Mikkelsen worked with him before in a film a few years ago called The Hunt, which is just devastating, like super good but devastating. And this is one of those stories that like you hear like, yeah, they're going to keep their blood alcohol at 0.05% for perpetually, but like there's no way that ends well,
Right.
right? Like,
Yeah.
so it's really curious to see. I'm really curious to see how that plays out and how it plays out for each of the four characters who are doing it, and to see how it
Mhm.
affects their lives and their relationships. So
Yeah. Yeah.
very excited.
Very interesting premise. It's on that one's on my radar as well, specifically because of that interesting concept. And like you say, how exactly is that going to play out? Like, I mean, if everything ends happy, then it wouldn't be a movie. So what lessons
Oh
are we
yeah,
going to learn from this, right?
yeah,
Um,
exactly.
so yeah, that's that's on my radar too. I'm really excited for that one. Um, the last one I want to talk about is um, this Hungarian film called it's called On the Quiet. You know, I read this description for the film, and it seemed mysterious because the concept is that there's this girl at this music school and something is going on with the music professor there that's shady, right? Like very inappropriate, and it seemed intriguing, but then I watched the trailer, and the trailer has this very like suspenseful tone to it. Now I don't know if it's going to end up being a suspense film or like what the ultimate genre is of it, but I want to know. I'm very curious. I'm very curious at what the story is here, what it's communicating, what ends up unfolding with the characters and how everything plays out. It's very much a concept that kind of lends itself to that mystery component. I love watching mystery suspense films and trying to piece together what's going on. So I'm excited to see what this movie is about and how it plays out. Really, it's just one of those movies that kind of like what we're talking about. Like how does this end? Like I got the premise, I got the setup. How does everything play out, and then what ultimately happens with it?
I mean, I'm not going to lie, this one actually wasn't on my radar until you mentioned it, so I haven't really looked into it too closely, but I'm
Mhm.
super intrigued by the premise.
Yeah,
Um, And I mean, I've had a pretty good year of, again, foreign film choices, so this looks like it might be a good one. And again, like, it looks like it has a very stark photography style as well, which is I just super like. I really like that. So I've watched a lot of German films like this year, again, for random reasons, and I really like that sort of very stark and cold style of cinematography that a lot of them seem to use. I find it very effective, especially in these kinds of like emotional dramas. Really contrasting like the fire in their performance versus the like coldness in the environment is really interesting to me.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool, we got through all 5 in like half an hour, or all 10, I guess. There are a couple honorable mentions I want to bring up. One of them, and these are honorable mentions because we covered these independently at the Fantasia Film Festival. The first one being special actors. Matt, you want to talk a little bit about special actors and maybe kind of go over what you thought about it and what you ended up writing about it?
So I very much do, but I'm very much not going to, because I think that you should go into this film as blind as possible. My writing partner on AwesomeFriday.ca, he actually is going to be reviewing that film for VIFF the same way that I reviewed it for Fantasia. And I'm so excited for him to actually watch it so we can talk about it after the fact. But it's by the same person who did One Cut of the Dead, which is on Shudder in the States and Canada, I believe. So you should definitely watch that. And all I will tell you is that it is a movie you should definitely watch. And it was the type of movie that will leave you with a very thorough and unpretentious feeling of happiness at the end. But I'm not going to tell you why. You should just watch it.
Absolutely. I have like half a review written because I want to, I almost want to go back and watch it again before I put my full review out. But I echo everything that you're saying, and like you're saying, no spoilers or any descriptions. Just it's certainly one to check out. And it's interesting because I think when I was watching it, about halfway through, I wasn't quite feeling it as much as I wanted to. But
I would actually agree with that. I didn't, honestly, it wasn't until the back half of the film where I was like, okay, I'm getting it now.
Yeah, exactly. The climax and then the conclusion is when I was like, okay, I enjoyed that a lot. So
and it's interesting because Shinichiro Ueda seems to now, like I've seen 2 of his films now, and he seems to specialize in making films that you just can't talk about with people who haven't seen them because you will spoil something about them. Like, I won't tell you anything about One Cut of the Dead either because you should just watch it. Because anything I tell you is going to spoil something.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So yes, that it's one to check out for sure. It's an honorable mention. That's why I wanted to bring it up. The other one, I don't think you got around to this one, but I watched Lapsus at Fantasia. Did you see that one?
It's actually one of the ones that I missed at Fantasia, and I'm really hoping to see it at this.
Yeah, and I do recommend it. The way that it world builds this very interesting community, and also the parallel that draws with like the real world that we live in of tech and conglomerates and systems that we all kind of have to work within that aren't always fair. It has a lot of social commentary there, but it's also a very entertaining film, and it's also interesting to kind of like be a part of figuring out this world that the main character is kind of thrown into. So I do recommend that one. I enjoyed it, and I have a review on moviesforreal.net if you are interested.
I read it already, actually. It's one of the reasons I want to see it.
Nice. Yeah, perfect.
Yeah. I do have one honorable mention that I'd like to bring up that honestly, like if we decided to talk about 6, this would have been my 6th pick. And it's another Canadian film, and it's called Happy Place. Have you seen anything about this film?
I have not. Wait, I might have, but I haven't looked into it.
So Happy Place is based on a play written by a Canadian actor and playwright called Pamela Sinha.
So it's about this, in particular, one woman, the main character, whose name is Samira, who suffered a really just horrible trauma and she goes to this private mental health clinic for people. She has attempted suicide, and she's sent to this private mental health clinic where she's placed in a group of another 5 women who have all also attempted suicide for various reasons. And the rest of the film is them just sort of learning to process their trauma and learning to support each other through their trauma. It looks very heartfelt and very, I mean, a little bit of a bummer, but also sort of uplifting, and this interesting story of women supporting women. And just that, like, everyone has trauma, women especially in our society today. And it's a very Canadian film. Pamela Sinha is I don't know if she's famous in America at all, but she's been on a number of TV shows and films here in Canada. And Samira's part of the story, which I won't spoil for you, but the trauma she suffers is actually very autobiographical. It's almost, from what I understand, it's pretty much exactly what happened to the screenwriter, and it's just awful. And I'm also just really intrigued by the idea that she's trying to work through this trauma through her art. And I just find that really intriguing. I also just happen to like movies that are based on plays, which you can do with, it's not playing at VIFF, but we both saw a film at Fantasia called The Oak Room, which we both enjoyed. And I sort of really like, it's sort of weird, but I really like films where it's just basically people sitting around and talking.
Isn't it interesting? Like, when it's done right, dialogue in a film can really keep the film entertaining, and just kind of having those, like, not getting so grand with how many locations and how many characters, but just like, look, we have this story, it takes place here, and these are the things that we're going to explore, you know, in this capacity. Like, yeah, and I think that when translating from the stage to films, at least for me, I do like that smaller scale in relation to film, just because you do have to focus so much on keeping the story interesting. There's not a lot of other components that you bring in to, like, bring in entertainment. There is a message and a story to get across, and it has to be done through the performances, through the dialogue, and then maybe the cinematography in some cases. So
there's also just a lot of talent involved in this one. The main character is played by an actress called Clark Bacco, and she's been a regular on a very popular Canadian show called Letterkenny, which I believe is on some streaming service in the States as well. There's 2 Canadian legends, Sheila McCarthy and Mary Walsh, one a character actor, one a hilarious comic actor, but in a more serious role. And the director, Helen Shaver, this is actually her first feature film, but she's been a fixture in television directing for the past several years. And even just like this year alone, she directed several episodes of Westworld season 3 and the new Snowpiercer TV show. Like, she's a very talented woman, and I'm very excited to see what she does with it.
Awesome. Good one to bring up. This one wasn't on my radar, but now it is. That's actually a really really interesting movie for me to check out. So thanks for bringing that one up.
Yeah, no problem.
Nice. What a great conversation. Thank you, Matt, for joining me for this.
Yeah, no problem. I'm just going to take a quick screenshot so I have something to put on the blog.
Yeah. Nice. Yeah, Matt, let everyone know how they can follow you and your content.
Yeah, so obviously my website, awesomefriday.ca, is where all the reviews will be. You can also follow the website on Twitter at awesomefridayca, or me on Twitter at posterboy81, and Instagram for both of those same names.
Yeah, awesome. Yes, and for real, you can find our coverage of VIFF and Fantasia as well, since that just ended. You can find our coverage of movies, movie reviews, and content at moviesforreal.net. Also on Twitter at moviesforreal. And then you can also follow me personally at beingtsj on Twitter. And yeah, I'm really excited to start putting out coverage of the Vancouver International Film Festival.
Yeah, I mean, it's VIFF is the streaming is unfortunately geolocked to BC this year, but at least it's actually happening. But I'm sure most of these films will end up in places you'll be able to see them wherever you are. So
yeah, that's exactly right. Like it's nice because when they go to the film festivals, even though this is geo-locked, but maybe they'll end up in a film festival here in the States, or maybe even on a streaming service at some point in the near future. Like there's a lot of opportunity for films that that do this film festival circuit, and all the films that we covered and all the films that are selected, I really hope for really prosperous lifespans for those films.
Yeah, 100%.
All right, guys, thank you for joining us. We're signing off, and like we said, keep in touch with us to see coverage of the 2020 Vancouver International Film Festival.
Thanks, Thomas.